Hello guys, and welcome to another video. And today we are gonna be learning how we can integrate an authentication system for our React applications. And it's going to be really simple. Basically, we are going to have a sign out page here and also a sign in page or login page. Basically, both pages allow us to authenticate. For example, here we can log in, and here we can create a user and authenticate immediately into our account. We are also going to have a profile page. This profile page is a private route basically, and we are going to display the information about the authenticated user. In this case, if we don't have an authenticated user, we are going to be redirected to the sign-in page. And yeah, basically that's pretty much it for the authentication service. We're going to use Firebase, and for our application we're going to use React Router DOM, also with Redux, make this possible. And to show you guys a quick demo here, I'm going to create a new user. So let me just go back here into the Firebase and refresh here. As you can see, we don't have any user. And just one quick thing on the signing methods, we have the email and password enabled. Okay, so I'm gonna just fill the form really quick. Go in venue at gmail.com, the password, just a random password here. And if we click sign up, we see this loading icon, we can call it that, and we go to the profile page and we can refresh the page, and we are gonna still be on this page. Basically here we only display the first letter of the name, and also we display the email. We can display more things, but to keep it simple, here the important part is to have a private route. And yeah, basically we can also log out from here, and we can try to log in again. Let me just show you really quick here on the users. We have this new user. Okay, I can try to log in again. Okay, just one quick thing that I forgot to mention is that we are going to have a system that's going to be really simple actually to manage the errors. So for example, we have one from when we are trying to log in with the wrong credentials, and also another one when we are trying to log in with a user that is not created. Okay, let me just type again the password, and we can sign in, and we get to the profile page. Let me log out really quick. And also with the sign out form, we have a system that can check, for example, if a user was already created. So I'm using the same email here, as you can see from the Firebase dashboard. And if we hit sign up, we get the message that the user has been already taken. So we need to try with another user. Here we can check for passwords and all of the errors that Firebase throws us, but for now I'm going to keep it simple, and then you can scale depending on what you are trying to achieve. But yeah, okay guys, so now with this, let's see how we can implement it. Okay guys, so the first thing that we can do is to check the libraries that we are going to use for this project. But I think before this is that I'm going to try to use a different format. So usually I go step by step on how we can build a system like this, but for now I'm going to try just showing you guys all the things that we did during the project. So we are going to go through each file and see what exactly that file does, and explain a little bit more. I think it's gonna be really helpful for you guys, so you can just get the explanation, and I can move quickly during this video. But yeah, let me know in the comments if this is a format that you guys like. And yeah, with this we can now start with the dependencies. So the important ones are this Redux dependency and the Redux DOM dependency. and also React Redux. We are using React Final Form basically for the forms. We need also Final Form and Firebase. For the UI, we use Material UI Core, and we also are using some icons, so we install also the icons. So you can go ahead and install these dependencies, and we can be on the same page. Okay, so I'm gonna start first with the index file. Basically, this index file is the main file that gets executed when our application starts. Here we have some simple stuff. As you can probably notice, this is the default structure that we usually get when we create a new React application. But here inside this, we are wrapping this like this is part of the code inside an event system from Firebase. And this Firebase system, basically what it does is that allows us to render only the application when we have the information about the authenticated system. With this, we can make sure that we have the information about the user, and then we render, and we can apply all the logic inside that. So let me show you first. We have here the Firebase. Okay, so we can go to the Firebase configuration, because with this Firebase we are importing that from this Fireback configuration file. Okay, so this configuration file is a simple configuration that Firebase shows us how we can do it on the documentation. So you can just go ahead and see that it's really simple. You basically have a cons variable here, and we set some properties like the API key, the auto main, the database, and all of these things. I'm using an environment variables for that, so we can change it, and you guys also can go ahead and use this project and just change this information so you can use it for your own Firebase project. And the libraries that we import is that we import Firebase app from Firebase, okay, and we also just import the Firebase authentication system, and we are only using these two libraries because Firebase recommends us to only use the libraries that we need for the project. So yeah, we are only using these two, and after the configuration keys we can initialize, right? With this Firebase configuration we export it, and basically this is all we need to start a Firebase project. Here we are using it to check the authentication system. Okay, so now another thing that we can go and check is the creation of the store from Redux. If you haven't seen videos from me before, it's pretty much the same configuration, but just in case, this configuration store is coming from this store file. Here we are going to have a function basically that takes an initial state, and also the Firebase instance, we can call it like that, I guess. And this configuration store or configure store, basically it creates our middlewares, and for this we are using thong for this, and we add an extra argument, and in this extra argument we add Firebase basically, so we can access Firebase every time we are trying to use dispatch for our actions. Then we have the composing hazards. These composing hazards, basically what it does is that it's gonna check if we are in development mode. Development mode is just a variable that we can read from the environment variables that check if we are on development or if we are on production. And basically it says if we are on development, we are going to use the Redux development tools. And basically these tools, if you don't know, if you are really new to this, we can go to inspect, okay, here on the code and on the browser, sorry, and here we can see all of the states and Redux information, and all of the actions, and a lot of information that I think is really helpful when you are trying to create an application. So this is basically enables this these tools, and if not, we use the basic compose from Redux, and then we create a new enhancer and we compose these enhancers. Okay, so we check and we apply the middleware here. So it's a function from Redux and we apply these middlewares that we created. Okay, and then we return create store. And this create store takes our reducers and also take our initial state and the enhancer here with the middlewares, and basically with this we can have a store running. Okay, so then we export all of these function as default, and one thing to check here is this reducer. This reducer is coming from this reducer. Okay, here. Okay, so basically we have the combined reducers. If you have used Redux before, you know what I'm talking about here. But basically it takes all of the reducers from our app and combine them. Then here we are going to import all of the reducers and we are going to add those into this object here. Okay, so this global reducers basically is taking all of the reducers from here and is trying to import that so we can combine it. These reducers basically are being exported, as you can see, inside this docs index file. So we have the auth and the user Redux reducers, and we are exporting that so we can, as you can see here, we use this like this structure to import all of the reducers, and then we export the app reducer, so then we can go ahead in the store and import that and pass that as the first argument of the created store. I hope this makes sense for you guys. Some simple steps, but yeah. Okay, so now here we are creating the store in the index file. Okay, we instantiate a new store and we call the configure store. Here as the initial state we are passing an empty object, and we also pass the Firebase from the Firebase configuration file that was created before. Okay, so with this information, now inside the React DOM render file, we can wrap our main application in a provider. This provider is from React Redux, and here we need to pass a store, so we pass this store that we created, and also after this we can start rendering the rest. In this case I'm using React Router DOM, so I'm gonna wrap that first with browse router, that it is from React Router DOM, and then this routes component, basically it creates all of the routes for our application. So now here is where it gets a little bit different. Usually if you haven't seen videos before from other guys on YouTube, they use a different way of creating routes. But for me on this video I found really helpful from different projects that I've made before, that having route configuration system for the routes, it really makes things easier, and you will see later how exactly this works. Okay, but basically we are going to map all of these routes and create the routes for us. As you can see, this route configuration is just a simple function that returns an array with a bunch of objects, and these objects are the pages of our app. So here we have a name. Okay, this name is not really required by React Router DOM, but we can use it for a key, or maybe later in the project we can use it to redirect by the name. So we can go and check and say let's go to the signup page, and we can create a function to loop through this entire function and check the path and use this path. I think that will make things a little bit easier, but for now we're not gonna do that. We're just gonna have the name, a path. The path is basically the path we are gonna use to render this component and this route, sorry, and then the component here basically it renders now, but it like creates a reference to the page that we are going to render. Okay, so here we are using the Signup page. As you can see, this is coming from containers. Later we're going to see these containers, but basically these are basic components that is going to represent the page of the app. For the login page, the same, we have the path for this route, and we have the component that it is called login page. Also the profile page path that it is the profile page component. And here is the interesting part where we can set this if we want to make this app private route. So for this we are using an auth key, and we are gonna say that the profile page is gonna have it's gonna require authentication from the user. And basically this is pretty much it. There is another key here that we can pass, for example, auth route, or let me check this auth page, I think it is called. So here we can define, for example, the authentication page, or the page that we want to do redirect if, for example, we're trying to go to this page and we are not authenticated. We are gonna go back to login, or we can say that we are gonna want to go back to the sign up page. I think I'm typing this sign up page. Okay, and yeah, but for default it's login, so we don't need to worry about that. But basically you can create a bunch of configurations here on this route configuration file. Okay, so basically this is pretty much it. So every time you want to create a route, you come here, add a new object, and just change the name path component, and if you want to authenticate or make this route private. We can close this route configuration. So basically this is the route configuration that we are gonna need now to create our routes. So for the routes we have a component called routes. Okay, so basically there are two components. We have a route component that wraps our routes basically, and we also have the routes that it is the component that creates all of the routes. Okay, so let's go really quick and see how exactly this works. We create the route, we receive some props. These props basically are all of these properties. In this case we are passing the routes here. Okay, so we destruct that and we read the routes that we just passed. It is a route configuration function that we created. Then we also add here, we use now Redux in this case. Remember, now we are inside our provider. Provider is dropping this routes folder, so we can access this state. So we access to the is authenticated state. This is authenticated state, you will later see how it actually makes sense, but basically we check if the user is authenticated or not, and we are going to use it to check if we can actually render the component if requires authentication or not. Okay, but basically this is pretty much it. We add Redux to read the state, and then we have another function that it is called route component. We receive a route element, and this route element basically it returns a new route. Now this is looks a little bit weird, but if you go to the code and check this route, it is coming from the React router DOM. Is this one? Is the same one that you will use to add a new route normally. So we use the route, we add the key. So in this case the key is gonna be the name. Okay, so we can check the route configuration so we can see it's basically this name here for each route. Okay, the path is this path that we pass here. The render, now the render, we receive a function with some props, so we call this route props, and we return a new component. This is a route component wrapper. So here we pass all of the route props that we will normally have for our components, like history, location, and all of that. And also we add an extra we add two extra props. We add the route, that basically each element here. So for example, this is one route, we pass that, and we pass this state that is checking if we are authenticated or not. And then later we are gonna check this. No, I think we can go ahead and see this. Okay, so this is the route component. This is the component that is gonna be rendered for each page. So this route component here, you can see we have a basic React component. We render and we return something. Okay, so for the render, we check some props. We check the route prop and we check the is authenticated. Remember, we pass this here, and then we destruct this route. And this route, you can see we're going to have these properties. So we have an auth property. Some routes might not have that. As you can see, we only have the auth property on this profile page. We have a component, is this component, and we change the name for component. We have an auth page. In this case, we can have it on some pages or not, but if in case that we don't have it, by default we are going to use the route login. And basically this is for the route. And then we can check here, for example, if we want to render this route or not. So we say we create a new show variable, and we say we want to show if we are not, or if we don't have the auth key. In this case, you can see we are going to render this one because we don't have the auth key. We're going to render this one if we don't have the auth key, but in this case we have the auth key. Okay, so if we have it, we're going to check also if we are authenticated. So if we have the auth key and we are authenticated, we want to show the route. But if we have the auth key, remember, is the OR, and we are not authenticated, we don't want to show it. So this is pretty much all it does. And now we return, if we can show the component, we return the component from the route, this component right here. Okay, and if we don't have this component, we want to redirect where to the auth page. Okay, so in this case the login page. And yeah, basically this is pretty much all it does. The route component is nothing too complex. You can go check the code and see exactly how it works, and maybe play a little bit with this. But with this is enough to make an authentication or a private route work. Okay, we have this one function. Basically with this we finish this function here. Now on the main routes, remember the routes is this one. The routes, we are going to map all of the routes. These routes are coming from props. Basically it's the routes from the route configuration, and we want to pass this to route component so we can return this route. And with this we will have all of the pages or all of the routes added to our project. As you can see, we're wrapping this into a switch. This switch is from React router DOM. Okay, and we are adding an extra route element. As you can see here, this route is the same as this one, but in this case we don't pass a path or a key or a render element. We pass a component called not found page, and basically what it does is that if by any change any of the route that we're trying to go doesn't exist, it will render this not found page that it is coming from our containers, and it is basically a page. And let me just show you really quick here. For example, let's just say that we want to go to a page that doesn't exist. We render this not found, and it shows us a link to go to the sign-in page. And this is something that you can change, of course, but for now we're using that. Okay, one thing to notice here is that out of this comment we are passing this route configuration in props because we don't want to re-render the page component every time the state changes. So for example, let's say that we don't pass these routes here and we use the route configuration directly into this page. One of the problems with this is that, for example, let's just say that we are trying to log in here and we hit the sign in page because we're using the route configuration directly in the routes file, it will basically remove the information that we pass here on these fields every time we hit sign in, because the state is changing, so it re-renders. So we want to be these routes always to be the same, so we pass that into our props. Okay, and that will solve the issue. You can go ahead and test that passing directly the route configuration and check how it behaves so you can understand better. Okay, and with this, basically we finish the routes component. Okay guys, now it is time to check the actual reducers, and the interface and how they both interact. So we're gonna check first for the authentication reducer here. So we have our action reducers, and we are going to go one by one to see what exactly those. But yeah, basically, first thing to look is this auth reducer. This is the one that we export here in the index. Okay, and we combine this reducer with the other reducers. Same thing as always, we have an initial state and the action. We can receive the type and the payload. Alright, so we destruct that here, and we do a simple switch to check the type that we are receiving in this reducer, and we execute some actions, or we change actually the state based on these action types. So if we go to the initial state, we can see that we have this is authenticated, the login in progress, login error. But for now, let's take a look at this is authenticated. This is authenticated, if you guys remember, is the one that we are using in the routes here. Is authenticated. You can see this selector we are selecting from the auth reducer is authenticated. This is the one that we use to check if the user is or not authenticated. And this is authenticated state. It is gonna change basically based on the, I think all of the action times it is gonna change. For example, when we log out successfully, they sign up successfully, and the login success, and also with the out info success. So let's take a look first at the out info success action type. As you can see, it updates the is authenticated based if we have something in the payload. Now if we go back here in the action creator, this out info success is the action creator, alright, and we send the type of out info success, so it will basically execute this part of the code, and the payload that we send is a user that we pass in this argument. So now we're only gonna use this on info success on the index file of the app. So as you can see here, we are importing the out info success action creator from the out.doc file. Basically we execute with the store.dispatch, and here we execute the action creator and we pass this user. Okay, so now basically this exactly what it does is that this is an event. So basically the app is gonna first execute, it's gonna check if there is a change on the state and the out state, and if we are authenticated, we're going to send this user, and here basically we'll make the is authenticated to be true, and if there is no user, basically the is authenticated is going to be false. And with this we can check or verify the first authenticated state of the app. And yeah, basically this is pretty much all it does, and this is the only place where we use this out info success. Okay, so now we have other actions, and we're gonna go first and check the login request. As you can see, we have three type of actions types for the login. We have when we have a request, success, and error, and basically the states that we are going to use for this is the login in progress, login error when we have an error, and also is authenticated is going to change based on these action types. So here in the reducer, these are the ones for the login. When we have a request, the login in progress is going to be true, the login error null in case that we have an error before from the login error. Okay, the login success, same, we update the in progress to be false, and the is authenticated now, it is going to be true. So this is something that we want always. If we send the success action type, basically we are going to be authenticated. Now for the error, login error, the in progress is going to be also false, and the login error now it is going to have something in there. Basically we are going to send the error message to the payload here. So now let's see the action creators. We have the login request, login success, a login error. For the request, basically we just send the type. For the success, we also send the type. For the error, we send any error, as you can see in the payload. So now these action creators are being executed here on this login function, where we receive an email and a password. Okay, and because we're wrapping this function inside dispatch, we get these other arguments: the dispatch, getter state, and the Firebase. So this Firebase, if we go to the store, we are sending that, adding that Firebase with extra arguments. So in here we're adding the Firebase, in case that you wonder. And basically, first thing to do is to dispatch the login request. So basically, we are going to make the login in progress to be true and clean the errors. Then we return the actual function from Firebase to authenticate. So the function to authenticate, it is this one: sign in with email and password. We pass the email that we are receiving from this argument here on the login and the password. And then we, if this is successfully, it will execute the then, and we are going to dispatch login success. Basically, we are going to log in. Now, in case there is an error, we need to catch the error. Basically, we send the dispatch login error, so we can get the error here in this state here. Okay, and we throw again the error. And the reason for this, I know it looks weird, but you will see later why we need this throw error here. Okay, and so now let's this is basically for the login. Now let's see how the interface looks and how it interacts with this login actually in the interface. So first thing to look is the containers. Here we have different pages. So we have the login page that, of course, it handles all the login logic. And then we also, for the login page, we have a form that basically it is this form right here. Okay, so this form, let's open that. We have the login form, and first let's see how are we building this login page. So here is where the actual page renders. So this is the component login page. So these styles are styles from Material UI. So if you have been able to see like the documentation on Material UI, you will probably find a form example that they have for the sign in and also for the sign up page, and I'm using those examples for this tutorial. And basically I just changed a couple of things, for example, to structure the actual page. So for example, the form, it is being rendered in the login form, but the typography for the name sign in and the avatar here for the icon are in this page. So these one are on that page, and the login form, it is on the login form component, and we will see that later. But these are the styles. I'm gonna probably leave a link on the description for this example, so you can see how I actually implement this on this page. But nothing too crazy here. Just one thing to check is that first we're using the login from the auth.doc. So it is this action, remember, and we are using use dispatch use selector from React Redux, so we can now in the login page use the dispatch here. We'll use it as a hook. All right, and we also have the login in progress and login error from use selector and from the out state. Login in progress, login error are these two states that we update, all right, for the login. Okay, and now we also use styles for the classes. In case that you wonder what this is, it's basically these styles that we are using for the avatar, for the paper and everything. Now there is another function here that it is the one that we are going to execute when we send or submit the login form, but we are going to check this later. But for now, yeah, this is the handle submit, and we have the return, and this is the actual page, as you can see here. I already told you guys about this one, but the form, and the form we are going to handle the on submit prop here, and we send this handle submit function. All right, and we also pass the in progress to check the progress of the form when we are submitting that, and in case that we have an error, we are going to check that here also with login error. So basically we are just connecting things in this login form. So now let's check the login form. Remember, it is here inside the forms. Okay, so here pretty much we're using React Final Form for this, so we need to import the form from React Final Form in order to use. We're using some components from Material UI, and the rest we're going to check that later. Also with this we can check that later. For the styles, basically these are the styles also from the example template that the guys have on their website for Material UI, but the actual form it is here. So here we are declaring the login form. We receive also some props, and we use the classes same as we did with the login page. And here we are going to start by adding the form from React Final Form as the main component for the return. Okay, so in case that you don't know how exactly React Final Form works, I'm gonna leave a link on the description exactly how you can get started with this, but I want to go really quick into this. Basically we pass these props here, all right, and these props basically are going to have a function, yeah, we can call functions or states that the form is gonna need, or props that the form is gonna need. For example, the onSubmit function, it's a prop that it is required by this form, so we're passing that in here by using these props. And also now we have a render. This render basically needs to return a form in order for this to work. So the render has some form props, all right, and these props basically have all of the states and values from the form. For example, here you can see in this part we are destructing the form props, and one of the things that we have is the handle submit. All right, this handle submit basically executes the onSubmit function from this form. All right, so basically it will be executing this. I know it's weird, but it is how React Final Form works. We also are receiving the in progress and on error because we passed those inside here, so basically we can get it in here. All right, and now we are going to check this error message later, so you guys can see first the form, how exactly it works. So we return a normal form as you will usually do. We add a CSS class, you know, or actually a Material UI style for this, right? This is part of the example. I'm not gonna go into this a lot, but you can see down the example, but what it actually matters here, it is how the login function is going to work. So we pass the onSubmit function, remember, is this handle submit. Okay, basically we close that in this return. This is the return inside the render. Okay. Now we're using grid from Material UI to styles the fields. So as you can see here, we have a main grid for the fields. Basically, we have a field for the email and a field for the password in this case. And now, as you can see, this field text input is not coming from Material UI. This field text input is a component that we created just to connect the fields from React Final Form with the fields of Material UI, because Material UI has, as you can see here, a text field. Alright, and if we are trying to just add that component here, it's not quite going to work. So we need to wrap that field from Material UI into the field of React Final Form. So that's exactly what we did here. Okay, so let's check what this field text input. Okay, so this is coming from components. We have the field text input and we open this. As you can see, it's a really simple code here, and the main function here is this field text input that receives some props, and we return a field, and this field is from React Final Form. If this is too confusing for you, I'm gonna leave, like I said before, a link of a tutorial that I did about this topic. But yeah, really simple here. We return a field from React Final Form, and it accepts a component. So here we use a custom component that we created. It's this field text input component, alright? And we are going to pass all of the props. Okay, so now in this component, we receive also props. Basically, all of these props that we're passing, we're receiving those here, and also with the props of the field, alright, when we use it inside this component. So one of the props from the field is this input, alright, so every time we use field, we receive input, and this input includes like the onChange function, includes the value function, and there is a lot of other props that you can use here, but in this case we don't need to go and change those. We are just gonna receive those input, and the rest, that basically this rest could be any other props but from Material UI. So basically we can use here, basically we merge these two fields, so we can use also props from the React Final Form and props from text field. Alright, so we just pass this, we return the text field, as you can see, from Material UI, and we pass the input props from React Final Form and the other props that we might pass to customize this text field for Material UI. And here I pass a full width, basically because we want all the full width always on the text field, because basically we're putting these text fields inside grid, so we want to match the width of the grid, if that makes sense at all. But this is pretty much all we have for this field. As you can see, it's really simple, and we are we're going to export that in an index file inside the components. We can close this field text input, but inside the components we're going to export this field text input. As you can see, use this way to export the field text input, so that way we can access that from the index components, and we access to field text input. And one of the things that we can do, alright, so with this field text input, this variant is from Material UI, so we use the outline, the required as well. The type in this case is email, that way the required needs to check that the actual value that we're passing is an email. The ID is required as well, the label. Alright, this is from Material UI. The name is from React Final Form. This name is the actual this name actually is the value that we're going to send when we submit the form. So we will be able to access the value of this with this name. Okay, so in case that we change it here, for example, emails, we will have to check for emails and not email. All right. Now the autocomplete email here and autofocus. So basically it will be autofocus when we first start this form. Now for the password, basically the same thing. The variant required, the name is password, the label password, the type password, right? So it has the like the, I don't know, on this protected way of typing for the password, you know. The autocomplete current password, that is doesn't really require, but it was in the example, so we are just gonna keep it. All right. And yeah, one thing before I forget, in the example you're going to probably see the text field from Material UI. So basically what I did is just add a couple of things like the name that we are gonna need. I think it didn't have the name, or I don't remember. In any case, I just basically merge these together so it works. Anyways, now the buttons, so basically these are for the element for the fields that we're gonna need. So basically we are gonna be able to access those with the name. Then we have a button here. This button is from Material UI. It has all of these properties, you can go and check that. But here we add an extra icon. So we add a progress or circular progress component here on the star icon. So when you submit the form, basically you will be able to see the in progress. Remember, this in progress is the login in progress from this state. All right, so we check that if we have this in progress. All right, we render a circular progress. In case that we don't have that to be true, it is null. The name here, and then we have here a link, but this link is not from Material UI. This link is from actual React router DOM, right? And basically it will allow us to go to the sign up page. As you can see here, we have the message, right? Is this one right here? Don't have an account, sign up. Okay, so we can go to the sign up, and yeah, and yeah, I think this is pretty much it. So one thing to know here is that this type is submit. So every time we click here, because it is inside this form, it will go and execute this on submit and handle submit. So we go here, and then we are going to execute this handle submit, and we get values. As you can see, we are destructing these values, the email and the password. These are the names, remember, email, and where is the name here, password. So we can access those here, and then we, from props, we're receiving history. This history is from our React router dump. Now let me go to routes really quick, and we are passing that history here. In case that we don't have these route props, the history won't be able to be in this component. Okay, so we received the history. So now we do a dispatch from this use dispatch, and we execute this login function, this one right here. All right, so we submit the email, the password, we close the dispatch function, and because this is an async function, we receive then, and that means that we were able to log in successfully. And here we use history push, and we go to the profile page. Now remember that here we throw this error. Okay, that's because we need to catch that here, and I added a comment that we already handled this. If we don't add this throw, basically even if the login fails, it will go to then, and it will try to go to the profile page, and we don't want that. So that's why we throw the error again here, and because we need to handle the errors messages, so we use this structure for that. Yeah, basically this is for the login part. Now let's check when we have an error in here. Okay, now the errors are being handled with this on error. Remember, when we have an error, we send the login error. And actually, if you see the documentation on Firebase, they use codes to represent like a type of errors. So those verifications, we're using the code. So for example, here we are declaring the wrong credentials. This is the code that actually Firebase throws us when we are using the wrong credentials. When the user was not found, this is the other code. And when the login is blocked, when the user is trying to log in an account and it fails and it doesn't type the password like correctly after 3 times, it will block the user. Alright, so this is this error. And we created a function here really quick that basically it will choose what message display to the user using this error. So because we are passing the entire error from Firebase, remember out.doc, we pass the error that actually comes from the Firebase. We receive an error, right, as an argument. We switch the error.code, we verify the code, and in case that it is wrong credentials, we print this message. For the not found, we print this message. From the login block, we print this message. And in case that the error code, we are not, in case that we have another error, we display something went wrong again. Okay, so you can go and check all of the error codes and print a custom message here for each error. So now here inside the render, remember, we are going to declare a new error message. Basically, we say if we have an error, alright, we print this error message, we call the function, right, and we pass the on error state that we receive from Redux. And in case that we don't have an error, we just replace it with null. So now here inside the form, we say if we have an error message, alright, we are going to print this on a typography with with the color error, and we display the error message. Because this print error message, it is returning, as you can see, on a string. So basically, this is how we are going to handle the errors for this login form. So we can close this, we don't need to save it. And yeah, this is pretty much all we need for the login page. Nothing too complicated. And now let's see how it actually works on the sign up page. So we can close this login page, also the login form and the components. Okay, so the sign up is gonna work similar to the login. Here we have the action types. As you can see, we have the request, the success, and the error for the sign up. Now for the state, we only declare the sign up in progress and sign up error. And the way that it is going to work is similar to the login. We have the request, we make the sign up in progress to be true and the error null. The success, we make it the progress false and the authenticated to be true. In this case, we are declaring this to be true because Firebase authenticate for us when we are creating the user. And the sign up error, we make the sign up in progress false and the sign up error to have the payload that we might pass here on the action. Okay, so if we go to the action types, as you can see, the request and the success are similar to the login, and the error same. We pass the error on the payload. Now, moving to the action, the sign up. Now we receive params as arguments, as you can see here, and we destruct that here, and we take the email, the password, the first name, and the last name. So if we go to the form here on the website, we can see that basically are all of the fields that we are going to have in this form. Okay, so now one thing that we did different here, because the first and the last name are separate fields, we just are gonna join these two into a full name. because Firebase only accepts like the full name for the users. Okay, so now we dispatch the sign up request and we return the function from Firebase where we create the user. So we use Firebase auth that create user with email and password, and it only accepts the email and the password, at least on the client side, so we pass that. And then after this we already have the user created at this point, and the only thing is to update the profile user so we can add the display name or the full name to the user. So as you can see, we receive the response of a rest.user, and then we can update the profile directly, as you can see here, and we only pass the display name and we pass this full name that we added here. Then after this happen, we can dispatch the sign up success message. That way the is authenticated gets declared to be true and the loading stops. Alright, and the catch is similar to the login. We send the error to the sign up error, alright, and we throw the error again because we need it when we're trying to redirect to the profile page. As you can see, it's really similar. Now if we go to the sign up page here on the containers, alright, and we go to the forms on the sign up form, so later we can see. Basically the sign up page is really similar on every aspect. The only thing that it changed here is that, for example, we call the sign up on the auth.doc. Alright, so when we dispatch this handle submit, we pass the sign up here, but the then and when we push to the profile is the same. Now here we don't have an email password. We basically are going to send all of the values. So here, as you can see, we are going to actually pass all of the values from the form because basically we are destructing that information here on the sign up page, or no sign up page, sign up action, right? So we pass those here, and for the return of the main page, basically we have the avatar, everything is the same, the typography, we only change the name here, and the form we are using now the sign up form. We have the same thing, we submit this handle submit function, alright, but the in progress and the on error are the sign up in progress, sign up error, alright, those are coming from here. And yeah, basically everything is gonna be the same. Now let's go to the sign up form. Alright, so let's start from here. Same thing, we are gonna use the form from React Final Form, these styles, alright, to actually format or to style all of these styles for the form. And then we have the actual form here. As you can see, we pass the same props. We have the render with the form props. We have the handle submit, in progress, and the on error. Now we are gonna see this later. Alright, we return a form with the on submit and we pass the handle submit. Alright, same thing. Now for the fields are the same thing, change a little bit because we added the first and the last name. So as you can see here, we have the field text input that we created, the custom one that we created is the same one. So it comes really handy that we can reuse it here. Basically we have the same thing, we need to pass the name here, and this name is the one that we can access on the sign up here on the auth.doc file. As you can see, first name, last name, alright, okay, here, and the email is gonna be the same, password is gonna be the same. Alright, so basically we only added the first and the last name on top of this, and the submit is gonna be the same thing. When we have in progress, you can see we add the circular progress and we change only the label. And now the link, instead of going to the sign up, here it's going to the login, already have an account, sign in. Okay. Now for the errors, last time we used a function to print the errors, but because we only are interested on printing an error here, we're only going to declare the user taking the email. The code basically is email already in use. And for the error, we have an error message, and we check for the error, and if the error that code is similar to the user taken declaration that we did here, we print that the user already exists, and if not, something went wrong, try again. And if we don't have an error, we only send null. So as you can see, the function really helps in the case that we have a lot of codes that we want to check, but in this case we can keep it like that. And same thing, we check if we have an error message, we display the error here, the error message, alright, and if not, we don't display anything. And pretty much that's it. As you can see, it's same thing as the login, only change a couple of things here on the actions and all of that, but actually Firebase make this really easy for us. Okay, so now let's move to the logout, and that is gonna be on the profile page. So now we go to the profile page, so we can open that to have that ready. We can close forms because basically we only need it for the login and the sign up. And let's go to the auth.doc, and we also are gonna need this user.doc. Okay, and this user.doc, we will see later what we are gonna do with this. But now on the profile page, so yeah, let me go and try to log in. Alright, so I log in to my account. So now for the profile, I didn't use any example, but it's really simple what I did here. Let me just show you in the code. Here we are on the profile page, and this is the actual page here. And a couple of things, we have the container with the same width, but we added a paper. This one, it adds the effect, this shadow effect that we have here. And we display a couple of things. We have an avatar that displays the first letter name, right? A typography that displays the full name, and then another one for the email. And this is a button so we can exit or we can log out, sorry. And now to for this to make sense, the full name, the first letter, and everything, let's go to the user.doc file. This is another reducer, and we only use this one to fetch the current user that it is authenticated. So basically we have an initial state with the current user, so by default is null, and we have the user reducer that basically it has two action types. So right now it only checks for two action types. So when we are trying to show the current user request, we don't do anything. Basically we return the current state. But when we show the current user success, we basically set the current user to have a payload. Now what this payload have, or usually have, is the user. As you can see here on the action creator, we pass a user to this type. Now the actual function that we have to fetch the user is this one. We don't receive any arguments, but we display the show current user request. Here we don't need to display any loading thing or whatever because it's not really necessary. But if you want, you can do something like that. In this case, not really required. Then we are going to read for the is authenticated state from this auth.doc state. So basically we are gonna make sure that we are authenticated. So now if we are not authenticated, we want to clear the user in case that we have a user. So we dispatch show current user success, right? And we pass null. Alright, remember, current user will be null in this case because it reads for the payload. and we return a promise because we need this to be async. So now here we are going to read for the current user, and the way that we do that is with this function from Firebase. We check firebase.out.current user, and with that we can get all the information about the user, and we just return promise.resolve. We use this patch show current user success, and we pass the current user. As you can see here, now the current user will be the one that it is authenticated. Now if we go to the profile page, as you can see, we have this fetch current user from the user.doc file, and that one is getting called on the use effect. So when the app or the component gets display on the screen, basically we fetch the current user using this patch from the use dispatch here, and after this basically the current user here will be the user from Firebase. As you can see, we use the selector state the user, that it is the name of the reducer. We can check that here, this export. Alright, so we get the current user from here, and now we are going to have the information about this user. So for example, the full name, if we have any current user, remember, because we at first we might not have the user, but later when it is added to the current user, we check that if we have it, and we check for the display name, that will be the full name. Now to get the first letter of the name, we check if we have a full name, and we get the char at 0, so basically the first letter. And for the email, we have the current user.email, and those are being added in these components here, and that will give us basically this result. Alright, now for the logout, we are going to use the logout from the auth.doc file. As you can see here, the logout is another action. We're going to have a logout in progress and logout error here. For the states, basically same thing as sign up. We make the logout in progress to be true or null, and null, sorry, the logout error. When it has a success logout, basically logout in progress is false and is authenticated. Now it is gonna be false. Alright, in the logout error, we set the logout in progress to be false and logout error to be the payload that we might pass here. And these action creators, you can see logout request is the same thing as the login and sign up, same with the success, and the error, same thing. Now the logout works similar. We dispatch the logout request and we return this function from Firebase. They have a function to log out, so basically we use auth.sign out, we use then, and we dispatch the logout success, and then we make sure that the current user, in case that we are in the profile page, it is actually null, so we use this show current user success. You can see we are importing that here, and we make that sure that it is null. This is an action creator, right? And we pass this to be null. And the catch, basically, in case that we had an error when we're trying to log out, we set that to the logout error state, and we throw back the error. And the reason is because we need to redirect to the sign-in page, in this case when we log out successfully. So if we go to the profile page, we import that here, as you can see, and we have a function to make that work. So we get the history props, from the route. When then we dispatch the logout, right? We just call it here. Then we use then to redirect to the login page and catch, and this is already being handled here in case that we get in error, so we don't need to do anything else. And we call this handle logout on this button, on the onClick function, handle logout, and with this we will be able to log out of the application. And as if we try to test this, I'm gonna refresh the page here really quick. Alright, so we get the user, and if we log out, basically we go to the login page, and we can try to go to the profile again, and it will redirect to the login. Alright, but this redirect from to the login is handled, as you already probably know, by the routes. Okay, so now last thing, I don't think it's really that important, but it is part of the code. We have the not found page, so I'm gonna close everything. Alright, and for this is really simple, nothing too crazy here, just a simple page that you can see that it has this message not found with a link from React Router DOM that says that I need to go to the login page. Alright, and pretty much this is all we need in order for this to work. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please let me know in the comments below if you like this type of format. Also, you can subscribe and like this video to support the channel, and see you guys on the next one.